Having the two Allens or not?
Okay, good evening, everybody.
Alan's here.
Okay, jumping right back in, we had started a new sugya with the Mishnah and the Gemara. And the Mishnah had said, brought the opinion of the Tanna Kama and the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And the Mishnah states, Bait shumalei perot v'nifchat nota mimakom hapachat. If I have some type of warehouse which is closed off, and Yom Tov, and there's an open filled with fruit or any food product, but it doesn't make a difference. V'nifchat, and there's an opening is created. Me'elav, Rashi adds. No tami makom habachad, you can go ahead and you can take the fruit or the food product from the place of opening. Rabbi Meir omer af pochet lechatchila v'nota. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that you can even go ahead and create the opening itself on Yom Tov. The Gemara says, Amai, why? Why what? Yeah, we spoke a little bit last time. What exactly is the Gemara asking on? We saw the Meiri. The Meiri brought two possibilities. Either the Gemara is asking now on the opinion of specifically Rabbi Meir. Why does Rabbi Meir say that you can go ahead and you can open it l'chachila on Yom Tov? Or it's asking on both opinions, both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Meir. And the question is of muktza. Why are you allowed to take the fruit, whether you're opening the petach or not? The fruit itself should be muktza.
Could you? I just. I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you please make sure you record it, please? Thank you.
Yes, I believe.
Thank you.
No? Yeah, we're recording. Okay, so those were two opinions we saw. Excuse me. Those are two opinions we saw in the Meiri of what the question of Amai was. Is it going on Rabbi Meir? And the issue is, why are you allowed to go ahead and do soter to make the opening, or is it going on both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Meir? Why are you allowed to take the fruit? Isn't the fruit muktza? Amai v'haka satar Allah. Are you not going ahead and isn't there an issue of stira, of being soter the wall? If the question's only on Rabbi Meir, so that's the easiest read, because Rabbi Meir is talking about making the opening. If it's going on both Rabbi Meir and the Tanna Kama, and the issue is muktza, so the issue is that since there is an isser of stira to get to these fruits, and that isser existed at the time of Ben Hashmashos, so it's given the katze Ben Hashmashos, because the katze Ben Hashmashos, the katze kula yomo. Your mind was detached from this item at Ben Hashmashos, and therefore it should be muktza for the duration of the entire Yom Tov. So Amar Rav Nechumi Bar Ada Amar Shmuel Ba'avir de Livni. What we're dealing with is stones or bricks that are just they're just stacked without any type of cement. How is that going to help us? So then there's not going to be any Isser De'oraita. Whether there's an Isser De'orabanan or not, so that we spoke a little about last time. But what's clear is that there's not going to be any Isser De'oraita. The Gemara then says, Ini, all of a sudden, wait, that's going to solve all your problems? You're going to be able to take the fruit, or you're going to be able to go ahead and open up the wall, depending again how you read Amai. V'ha'ama Rav Nachman, did Rav Nachman not say, Hani milibni di'itur mivnina shari litotune b'shavcha ho b'chazid mimizga alayu shaginan vadi iksane. Rav Nachman says that if you have stone, bricks that were left over from building in a building site, so you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to move them because they are ro'oi to go ahead and sit on them. They have now some type of purpose, some type of service. But if they're stacked, if they were set aside and stacked in a certain way, which clearly shows that they're not for sitting on, either they're set aside for building or they're actually being used for building. So vade ikti'inahum, for sure a person has removed his mind from using them for something else, and therefore they would be muktza. So how could you move these bricks? Aren't they muktza? Or how can you go ahead and get to use the fruit? Weren't they blocked by something that was muktza? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Zera b'Yom Tov Amru. Enochanami, you're right. Our Mishnah though is talking specifically about Yom Tov, Avalo b'Shabbat. Shabbat ein echanami, you'd have a problem. You wouldn't be able to use the brick, move the bricks, or you wouldn't be able to take the fruit. But because it's Yom Tov, so then we're okay. As a Beitza, we have supports this. Tananami hachi, Rabbi Meir Omer, af pochet lechatchila v'nota b'Yom Tov amru avalo b'Shabbat. This whole heter, that Rabbi Meir was talking about, is only talking about on Yom Tov and not on Shabbat. What's the difference between Yom Tov and Shabbat? So we suggested last time, either the issue is of Simchas Yom Tov or Ochal Nefesh. That has to be analyzed. And we also mentioned that this Beitza, the fact that the Gemara brings this Beitza, supports in a certain way the read of the Gemara that Amai was going specifically on Rabbi Meir. For at the end of the day, we bring a Beitza which is in Rabbi Meir's name. You could read it that it's just to show you that the whole discussion here was only talking about Yom Tov, and then we would project that back on the Tanna Kama as well. That's what we saw last time in terms of that. In the Rishonim, we saw Rashi. Sorry?
Is it stira if you're doing it to destroy and not to rebuild?
It would be derabanan stira. It would be enachanami. You're right. So you're saying here, why do I have to get to aver delivni to make it derabanan? Isn't it derabanan just from the very fact that I'm
looking the exact opposite way around. That it would only be stira if it is a case of without the plaster, because then you can rebuild it, and so it could be taking it down in order to rebuild, and maybe there's some disagreement on it. But I mean, if we're looking at the Rabbanan, then it's a Rabbanan on a Rabbanan on a Rabbanan with this stira.
right? So I can give a couple answers to that. Number one, some of the person talking about that. How did it get here? We're talking about sometimes it got locked in there. It was broken in. It was locked in, and either the door got locked or something like that. It was just there is no opening. So by going ahead and breaking through the wall, so it is in a sense soter al minat livnot, because you're breaking the wall in order to create an opening, which in a sense you could say that's really binyan. Right? There's a difference if I just break down a wall and that serves no purpose. It's mekalkel. It's a destructive breaking, and that's not going to be d'oraita. In order for a malacha to be d'oraita, it has to be constructive. So there are some malachot which inherently are destructive, and so therefore the Gemara or the Mishnah goes ahead and elaborates and explains that there has to be specific situation. It has to be a specific situation in which this destructive malacha is being done for a constructive purpose. For instance, to erase. That's destructive. Why are you erasing? You had great writing and now you just erased it. So Mishnah says it has to be mochek ama not lichtov. So I'm going ahead and now I've made that erasing, that destructive act, into a constructive act. But so if I go ahead and if I have a wall and I just, smashy and I break it down, so then that's destructive. And I have to be that I'm breaking down the wall in order to redo the room. But there could be some times where a destructive act in itself is constructive just for the sake of not rebuilding it. But creating a petach, that itself is constructive, even if I don't build more after it. I think, did I address the issue?
I mean, and the other issue is you're talking about a place that's not cemented, which means it's not really a very strong house. So how can you build any type of building or soser or something like that, right? That's not really a house that's very, very strong, right?
Yeah, so that's the point, huh?
So
That's the point. Isn't that the point? That it's not very strong, it's only stira d'rabbanan, so it's not.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's only a stira d'rabbanan. It wouldn't be a stira d'oraita. Like if it was a very strong wall and you would make a hole in order to get some, maybe it wouldn't be much, that's what they're saying, right?
Right,
And
exactly. Exactly. The fact that the wall itself was awry, it was just piled up there. There was no cement to solidify it. Makes it only derabanan. Okay. So we saw Rashi. Rashi made the distinction. Rashi said, "Nota mimakom hapachat v'lo amrinan muktza in machmat isarhein de'en yochol avchot b'yom tov v'asiach da'ato minayo de'kem de'lo ave b'chitato isur d'oraita k'dakmina la ba'avir delivni lav muktza ninu." Because Rashi explains, because we're not talking about soter d'oraita, it's only soter d'rabanan. Therefore, there's not going to be any muktza midate on the fruit inside, and you're going to be okay. Mashma from Rashi that if the stira was amalav d'oraita, so then the fruit would be muktza. Right? Rashi makes this distinction between d'oraita versus d'rabanan, and he brings proof from as we saw last time from the Gemara in later on in Beitza about if somebody went ahead, and we'll talk about this hopefully later on tonight, and was mitaken tevel, went ahead and they were mafresh truma on Yom Tov or Shabbat. So even though one might have thought that since I wasn't allowed to eat from this tevel when it was bein hashmashot, so therefore if somebody went ahead and was over the Issur D'Rabbanan and was mafresh truma on Shabbat, so I think, well, you can't take from the fruit because you didn't have it in mind, so it's muktza. The Gemara says no, it's tevel is mucha netzel Shabbat. If somebody went ahead and was over and they were mitaken the tevel on Shabbat, you can go ahead and take from it. So Rashi says, you know why? Because it was only Issur D'Rabbanan, and if it's only Issur D'Rabbanan, it's not going to go ahead and make the item muktza afterwards. That was the distinction that Rashi made. We attempted to explain that based on the Netivot. Netivot HaMishpat explains that in the Chiddush that there's a fundamental difference between Isurim D'Oraita and Isurim D'Rabbanan. Isurim D'Oraita, you can have Isurim D'Oraita that are on a person, that are on the Gavra, and you can have them that are on the Cheptza. I can't eat a piece of pork because the piece of pork is intrinsically treif, right? I can't cook on Shabbat because there's a prohibition on me to go ahead and do that action on Shabbat. Cheptza and Gavra, they both Isurim D'Oraita exist in both realms in that regard. Says the Netivot, when it comes to Isurim D'Rabbanan, when the rabbis come along and they're putting the restrictions, so the rabbis, they don't have the ability to go ahead and intrinsically change the ontological reality of an item. They can't tell you this piece of meat is intrinsically now D'Rabbanan treif. All they can do is they can say, listen, you don't do it. You have to listen to us. That's the maximum we can do. All these Isurim D'Rabbanan are going to be on the Gavra. That's why the Netivot and his big Chiddush is that there's no onesh, there's no such thing really as in a shogeg Issur D'Rabbanan. Because if it's shogeg, that means you didn't know what you were doing. And if you didn't know what you were doing, then you can't say that you were blatantly going against the rabbi's words because you didn't know. So it's kind of a tarti desatre. And that's why there's no onesh, says the Netivot, for a shogeg Issur D'Rabbanan. So how do we use this to explain Rashi? When you're talking about an Issur D'Rabbanan, so we're talking about an Issur D'Oraita of Soter. Right? The reason that it's an Issur D'Oraita Soter is because Midoraita, I have a wall here. Right? There's a wall with plaster, with cement. It's really here. And therefore, I have restrictions on Shabbat to go ahead and I have a certain type of relationship with this wall. I can remove bricks or I can't remove bricks, but it's a wall, D'Oraita. If the rabbis come along and they say, yeah, Soter D'Rabbanan, right? Because it's just a ohel harai. It's not really a wall. Right? It's like make believe in a certain sense. The rabbis are saying make believe a wall's here. So when there's an actual wall there, so then that would go ahead and make the fruit behind it muktza, because there's an actual impediment from you getting there, a physical one, versus only D'Rabbanan. So then it's a make believe wall that the rabbis told you that you have to pretend like it's a wall. And therefore, it doesn't affect the fruit behind it and will not make it muktza. Okay. Adkan was a review from last time.
Is muktza d'Rabbanan?
Sorry?
Is muktza d'Rabbanan?
Muktza, yes, muktza is the Rabbanan. The nature of, not necessarily all muktzas were created equal. The institution of muktza was an evolutionary one. There are 5 types of muktazas, and they happened over an evolutionary period, and they're not necessarily all on the were made for the same reason, but they all are derabanan.
So isn't that a logical way of looking at it? You can't use a Rabbanan to maybe chuyiv you from another Rabbanan.
But so it's true. In goes in gzera al gabi gzera, but that I don't know if that applies here. For instance, let's say there's a malacha derabanan. Let me give an example. Let's assume that there's some type of toy, kids writing toy, whatever the case is. Okay, well, make believe there's some type of toy, which is only kotev derabanan. It's not, for whatever reason, it's not kotev deraita. It's only kotev derabanan. Electric. It's enumet kayim. Whatever the reason is, can you touch that? Is that toy muktza on Shabbat? Is it muktza machma iser? So, Alan, according to your argument, we would say, well, muktza is only derabanan, and it's only a derabanan malacha, so we should say the toy is not muktza. But we don't say that. We would say the toy is muktza, because once we define it in one area, we say no, this is a malacha derabanan, and so therefore it's going to have implications for other things. It's going to be muktza machma iser. Here by the wall, I think it's different because there's not really a wall there in the first place. So there's nothing which is stopping you really from getting onto this. You don't have to love this answer. I agree with you. It's not perfect. It's a little abstract, but we'll see other ones. We'll see other answers today. Okay. Tosfot. Tosfot takes issue with Rashi. Tosfot says, Rashi, what are you talking about? Let's see it inside. V'nifchat nota makom avachat. Perish Rashi. Rashi explained, nifchat me'elav. V'im tomar amay nota makom hapachat. Ha'havi muksa bein hashmashos da'asr lefchato b'yom tov midarabanan. So it says, if you say, why am I allowed to go ahead and take it? Is it not muksa because I was not allowed to go ahead and take to remove the bricks? Derabanan. Umigo did katse ben hashmashos di katse kuliyoma, and because it was out of mind, out of sight during ben hashmashos, it'll be that way for the entire day. Uperish bekuntras, Rashi explains the came in the eno asra element derabanan levachot kidemukim and alei begamara ba'avir delivni hashad nifchat shari lemechal minay the muksa derabanan lo mina migo did katse the ben hashmashos v'chulei. No, because it's only derabanan, so there is no muksa. We don't say migo did katse ben hashmashos. We don't say that with a muksa derabanan. Amar gavi tevel, just like we see regarding tevel. Okay, now here Tosfos takes issue. V'lo nihira, no way, not a chance. Why? The Amar gavi Shabbat gavi sal lifnei hafrochim migo did katse afagav de'in sham muksa ela midarabanan. V'chen gavi galgal muchani sheyesh ala ma'od. So Tosfos brings 2 cases, basically where you have if you put a basket in front of little chicks, and the chicks jump on the basket. So if the chicks jumped on the basket and they were in the basket, ben hashmashos, so then the basket, just like the chicks are muksa, so too the basket will now become muksa. You have ma'ot that are on some type of bedstand or bed, some type of piece of furniture. You put money there before Shabbat. So now the stand now becomes muksa on Shabbat. If the chicks then jump off in the middle of Shabbat, they jump off from the basket, or somebody knocks the money off of this nightstand, they're still going to be muksa. You can't move the nightstand. You can't move the basket. Or it's only derabanan. the chicks are only muktza derabanan, the money is only muktza miderabanan. So how all of a sudden are you going to? There you see a case where you have one muktza, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to prevent you. It's going to create a muktza on something else, and it's only derabanan. Isn't that a steer to Rashi?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, what are you saying? It's a basis or davar asur?
Yeah, he's basically asking from basis. Basis is I have muktza on. Why is this different than basis? I have muktza that was on something. Here I had a wall which was preventing me from getting the fruit.
Isn't
Well,
that,
the
isn't that a
afrochim,
sorry.
the afrochim aren't preventing him from getting the basket or anything. It's just the afrochim freeze the basket, so to speak. You freeze it in a shmasha.
Right.
So that might be a little bit different than preventing someone from getting hold of the fruit.
The afrochim are there and they're stopping me from getting to the basket. The afrochim move, I still can't touch the basket, even though the chicks aren't there anymore.
The afrochim are not stopping me from getting the basket. It's just because I can't move the afrochim, I can't move the basket also. So they're part of the muktza of the afrochim. Not like the afrochim are preventing me from touching the basket or getting to the basket.
And why is that different than the wall? I can't break down the wall on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and therefore I can't get to the fruit.
Right, so I can't break down the wall, but the wall isn't transferring its own muktza onto the fruit.
Okay, good, excellent. I agree with your analysis that there is a big difference, and I think Tosfos' comparison, the basis is off the mark for exactly the reasons you're saying. I think the Ramban, we'll see in source number 6, is gonna elaborate that a little more. So we'll see that inside. Let's see how Tosfot answers this. Tosfot brings a different answer. He says, "V'amar Harav Moshe, Delo amru ella sha'muksa enu mistalek min ha'olam kegon ma'ot, sha'af agav hakar, sha'af al pi shenatlam adayin hin ba'olam, aval b'tevel miyad shetiknu ha'tevel mistalek ha'muksa mikol v'kol." So Tosfos brings Rav Moshe, who explains the difference between our case of the money on the nightstand versus this case is the cause. Is that cause? It's still in the world. The money that stopped me from being able to move the nightstand, it's still here. It's just in a different place, right? The isser to break the wall that was there, the wall is not here anymore. And therefore,
it's hard to understand what the logic of that is.
I agree. What's the logic? I agree with you.
So what if it's still in the world, but it's still not on the basket?
Right. And Tosfos is saying there's like a bigger siluk of the isser when it of the moneh. There's a bigger siluk of that which was preventing me from getting to the item when it comes to the wall, because now the isser is totally not there anymore. There's no more wall, as opposed to the money. So it's a nice chiluk, but and therefore what? Why should that have any real significance? Halacha l'maisa. Open to the forum. I don't have a good answer. I think it's a little bit strange of an answer.
Let's back up a sec. What is the case of the Sully Stanfro? Isn't the Sul something that someone took a basket with intent so the Ephraim could jump on it in order to get into their nest?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so with the basket, the intent here is he's changing the basket from a basket to a step. So before Yontif or before Shabbat, he has in mind that this basket is not going to be used as a basket, and it's going to be a step. That's not the same as our case at all.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's what Sam was alluding to. That and we'll see this in the Ramban. That when you're talking about a basis, it's not the reason that a basis. And I think you just
no. But I'm not talking about a basis in the sense that a basis could be something that has it's with intent that's a bussies. With intent that you converted a basket into a step. It's not that it's just a bussies to something that was usher. It's you've done it with intent that you turned this into a different object.
Right. Well, every buses it can only become a buses if there's intent. If something was placed by accident, then it won't become a buses. But I think it's for the point that you're saying. It's not just there are little baby chicks on my basket or there's money on the thing. No, before Yom Tov or before Shabbat, I went ahead and I said this is no longer a basket. It's a support for these baby chicks. It's a step for them. So you've allocated it as something that's muktza in and of itself because of the chicks. You've connected it to the chicks. It's something for them.
You bein hashmashot, you've made it something muktza. Forget about the chicks. Bein hashmashot, you've taken an action that has made the object itself separate from the chicks into something that is not permissible on Shabbat or Yom Tov.
No, but one second, Avi, it's only if the chicks are on the basket, bein hashmashos. If you put it there, bein hashmashos, and the chicks don't go on it, it won't become a busis, I don't think. It's just the fact that you say it's for the chicks doesn't make it a busis.
I don't know. I mean, we have with wood. If you designate wood for something, even if you're not using it, and then you want to use it for something else, once you made that designation, the wood's off limits.
Oh, why? Because then the wood becomes a muktza machmat chesron kiss. You've designated for something in which I won't use it for anything else because it's expensive, because it's unique for that, and I don't want it to get damaged. But a basket that I'm making it a stepping stool for a chick, and if I want to turn it over, the chicks have gotten to their nest, and then now I want to turn it over and use it for a picnic. I wouldn't do that.
Again, if you designate it before Yom Tov, and even if they're not on it, I don't know. I don't know what the halakha is.
Okay, it's worth looking into it. If I recall correctly, it's only if the chicks are on it during Ben Hashmashos, but perhaps I'm wrong. So I'll have to look back into that. But the distinction that Tosfot here makes in the end, whether that there was a complete siluk of the prohibition, or it's just no longer on the item, I be honest, I don't fully understand why that should have any ramification. Let's see the Ramban. The Ramban it presents first one answer, one explanation of the Gemara, which isn't really related to our discussion, but we'll read it anyways. And then his second discussion here is related to what we were talking about. Ramban says as such: "V'nira li the matnisim v'bayit sotum v'nifchat mi'erev yom tov hu b'ktani notam v'makom apachat b'lo makom acher l'mar she'inu mosif b'chat klal." This explanation, one of you said this last week, that we're totally this explanation says we're totally misunderstanding the Mishnah. We're not talking about a house that was closed during Ben Hashmashot and then got opened up on Yom Tov. It was open on Erev Yom Tov. It was open on Erev Yom Tov. And the chiddush of the Mishnah is notam makom apachad. You're allowed to take from that space. You're not allowed to go ahead and widen the opening. Right? That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Rameir says, no, you're allowed to go ahead and take from that area. It could have been that the chiddush of the Tanna Kama is that we allow you to take from that place, and there's no gzeira lest you come to expand the opening. Right? But it seems that this answer or this explanation of the Mishnah is perhaps presented because it's avoiding the whole issue of muktza. Like the explanation saying, "Enachanami," if it was closed on Ben Hashmashos, so those fruit are muktza, you can't touch them, and therefore we have to explain that there was no issue of Ben Hashmashos, the wall being closed off. We're talking about it was open during Ben Hashmashos, and the Mishnah is talking about a different issue, whether you're allowed to take from the opening or not. Okay, that's all we need from the first paragraph. It's interesting.
How does the Gemara deal with that issue? Because it talks about stira. If it was open, what's the whole issue?
Good. So according to this explanation, the Gemara of Amai, the question of Amai in the Gemara would only be on Rabbi Meir. Right? Because Rabbi Meir says you can open it. You're right. You wouldn't be able to read Amai on to be on the Tanakama as well. It just wouldn't work. Okay, so the Ramban then brings a Od Yesh Svara Lomar Sha'apa Peret Ein Na'asin Muktzain Machmad Habayit Kiven She'ein Ba'atzman Iser Lo Amru B'Ner Ela B'Bnei Na'ase Basis L'Davar Aser Ve'ein HaPerot HaSvurim B'Bayit Basis L'Bayit V'hu Lo Huksa Da'ato Min HaPerot B'Shvil HaPerot Atzman Ela Da'ato Alein La'achil Kol Zman She'Yuchal Nikach Otan. And this, I think, is exactly what Sam and Howie were alluding to, that there's no problem with the fruit. The fruit didn't get anything from the house. It's not like a basis from the house. With the nair, that's the example that he gives. Tosfos wasn't talking about a nair, but a nair also. A nair can become a basis l'davar aser of the flame. The candle can become a basis for the flame. Because of the flame, it infiltrates the candle. The chicks infiltrate the basket. The money infiltrates the stand, and it becomes just like that. The fruit doesn't become like the wall. It's just, I can't get there. So for the Isser Derabanan to take down the wall is not going to affect. It's not going to. I didn't remove my mind from the wall. If I had a way to get to the wall, I would go ahead and eat the fruit. Right?
But even according to Rameir, if it was a closed place, right? How does he allow? So I'm trying to understand Rameir. If the place was sealed, right? Then he would have his mind wouldn't be in the Paris because there's no way he can get to them. Is that the Chiddush of Rameir, that it's only on Yom Tov and not on Shabbos that you're allowed to do that, according to this opinion?
Right. So the Chiddush of Rabbi Meir is that that there's a kula on Yom Tov because of either Simchas Yom Tov or Ochel Nefesh. It's going to override. It's going to override the issue of either the issue of muktza, or there is no muktza, or the issue of stir derabana.
Okay. I'm just trying to fit them Rameir in terms of this, right? So basically, he's talking about the Chachamim more than Rameir in some ways.
Yeah, correct. Oh, and then he compares it to Tevel, which I think is an interesting discussion. V'masha amru b'Tevel shehu muchan etzel Shabbat, shem avar b'tiknu mitukan. Right? You still have to do. Rashi's whole proof was from Tevel, that if someone goes ahead and is mafresh truma, now you can go ahead and you can eat it on Yom Tov. Isn't that a problem with the food itself? All right. So what do you do with that? So ani omer the hachikamar. Kevin the Tevel ra'oi ve'omed la'adam who kodem shetiknu k'la'achar shehu mitukan. The Tevel itself, it's the same apple. Nothing really changed inherently in the apple. It's more of just a change in name. Ve'ein alav ela iser oto Hashem shehu Tevel. The only thing that it changed, it was Tevel, and now it's not. Now it's mufrash. Ve'efshar la'oto iser sheyifka b'Shabbat muchanhu. Daha perod gufayu michsi chazu ve'ena mechusurim shom malacha. There's nothing that needs to change. I don't have to do any actual action, physical change to the fruit to make it now ra'oi. I just have to remove the shem Tevel. Aval muktza machman iser the ka'asrei zeh davar she'enu royo ad sheyaseh b'malacha asur b'Shabbat. But if I have something which is muktza because of iser, so I can't get access to it unless I actually do some type of action. I make a change in it. Kevin ja'asr min haTorah midavreim go mita shel ma'ot v'ner ina mishochi b'Shabbat she'enu royo lo ad sheyaseh ma'aseh ha'asur b'Shabbat I have apples that are attached to a tree. I have a cow that is alive and well. I have money that's on the desk. All of these things, in order for me to access the food item, I have to make some type of physical change. Pick the fruit, kill the cow, pick up the money and move it. And therefore that's gonna be the problem. All of them I have to do some type of a prohibited action. About the tevel, yacholhu she'enu rashai. Tevel, he can. There's no actual physical action. He's just not allowed to access it. Okay, so according to the Ramban, what's the difference between tevel and all of these other forms of muktza, of basis? Whether I'm actually making some type of physical change in it, or I'm just removing a shame. Question is that so true? Is that 100% clear? Like, what is tevel?
Don't you have to take away some of the truma and you separate it, so you are doing a ma'isa in some ways, no? Or you're saying that this little component there on the fruit, this pile, this little part is truma, right? Or whatever, right?
It doesn't change.
But you still do. But you need to separate it, no? Or you just, I mean, doesn't that become muktza because you can't use it anyways, or you have to give it to a kohen? For you, it's muktza, no? In some ways.
Right. So yeah. So I would say like this. If tevel, if the relationship between tevel and truma was as such that I have this fruit, the truma wasn't taken, and there's truma mixed in, and because the truma is mixed in and I haven't taken out the truma, so I'm not allowed to eat the stuff that's not truma. Once I remove the truma, I can go ahead and I can eat the rest of the fruit. So the apple that wasn't truma, nothing happened. Like nothing happened to that apple. It's just the same old apple sitting in the same exact position that it was before. I just removed the shem tevel by taking out the truma that was already there. Right? Had that been the relationship between tevel and truma, what's going on when I take truma, so then I hear it. That makes a lot of sense. But that's not really what happens. Meaning, tevel is not.
Borer? Is that borer?
Is it? Borer aside. It's a good question. Let's put that on the side for now.
Can't you separate truma without removing it with a ma'isa?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Also, you can also, you don't have to actually remove it. You can just call it, and that's truma, and then it's in that corner.
The last 10 apples at the bottom of the bushel is
Right.
truma.
Right. You can do that, and you avoid the whole borer issue. But my point is that that's not really what's going on when I take truma. Meaning, tevel is not a mixture of non-truma fruit mixed with truma fruit. How do I know? How do I know it's not just a mixture of truma mixed in? What's the isser of a zar, if a non-kohen eats truma?
Mita b'dei shemayim.
Right. Is it mita b'dei shemayim?
I think it's mita b'dei shemayim.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
it's true.
Okay. What happens if a person eats tevel?
It's a machloket. There's arguments about that.
Is it still love? No, he's mavatal. Sorry, mavatal nase.
There's some people that hold it's mita b'dei shemayim.
Really?
Even if you took out the truma, there's some people. But I know there are opinions that it isn't, but I think it's mita b'dei shemayim mita. Certainly there are opinions that way for sure.
Okay, I thought it was just mavatal and ase. Let's take what I'm saying home because it works better.
But I might be wrong, by the way. I might be wrong. You could, I'd like to.
Okay. My point is, if the isser, if it was just that truma was mixed in, and if I eat the tevel and there's truma mixed in, then it should be the same punishment because I'm eating truma. But it's not. It's a lower punishment, meaning truma doesn't become truma until I actually separate it, whether I physically separate or I call it by shame. I actually now make a distinction and say this is not truma and that's truma. But before I do that, there is no truma. Truma doesn't exist until I do something to separate it from the rest of the pile. So if that's the case, then I really am transforming that apple that was just sitting on a table. Before it was tevel, everything was tevel, and now it's something else totally.
You're talking about a spiritual transformation, and he's talking about a physical transformation. In other words, when someone looks at that tevel, no one knows it's tevel. It's only you that knows it's tevel, and then you're doing what is correct to it and giving the truma. In the case of the animal, whether you shecht it or the other cases, anyone who looks at it knows the status or the lack of status. And you need another physical action to change its appearance in order to make it permissible.
Well, so Harry, let me ask you: when I remove the money from my nightstand on Shabbat, I haven't done anything to the nightstand.
But it's still money. Physically, it has not. It's still money.
The money. So I removed the money, but the nightstand, which I'm interested in, the nightstand is my apple that I haven't moved.
Except with the apple, even when you move it, nobody knows what you moved. In other words, it's something that only you know in your head, whether you took truma away from it or not. And to anyone else looking, no one knows what action was taken. With the money, if someone takes it off the basket, someone knows money was taken off. It's an invisible action. Like, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying it's something that's not perceivable, that could be perceived by anyone else.
Okay, I hear it. There's a little more oomph to the action there.
But if you hold that you can be mafresh truma without doing anything, just sitting there and thinking, oh, in my mind it's in the corner there, then for sure you haven't done anything at all to the food to bring it from tevel to raya lachila.
Right. I hear. I was just my argument was I hear both. I think both of what you're saying is correct. I just my argument is that it's not that like nothing is happening to this apple that I want to eat, and there was truma in the way. There was an actual transformation. Right, you're right. You're both correct that there's not a physical action being done to anything in one case and there's in the other. Okay. The Ran, this answer I really like. Yeah, the Ran was talking about a totally different case. This is actually one of the first Rans on Masechet Beitza, so we get to go do a little review. To recall, the Gemara there was the Mishnah said Beitza shenolda b'yom tov. Can you eat the egg or can you not? Machloket Beit Shammai Beit Hillel. And then the Gemara questions, well, what type of chicken are we talking about? Are we talking about a tarnagolet l'gadal beitzim or a tarnagolet la'achila? Is this chicken going to go ahead and lay eggs for me? And that's what it's for? I didn't plan on eating it? Or is it one that I was going to have for my Yom Tov lunch? Okay. So the Ran says like this: Vikala meidak dahacha mashma keben da tarnagolet muktza af habeitza nigreret achareha. Mashma from the beginning sugya that if the chicken is muktza, a muktza because it was to go ahead and raise eggs, to lay eggs, it's not food, then the egg that would come out of it would also be muktza. Ve'ilu lekman mishma'itan akshinan elame'ata shabbat de'alma tishteri. But later on, the Gemara says, after it goes to the whole answer of Rava, it says, well, one second. If it was just Shabbat, right? Rava's answer was about Muchan, and therefore Rava said the Mishnah was only talking about Shabbos and Yom Tov, one right after the other. And the Gemara there said, so it should only be permissible, on Shabbat it should be permissible. We don't have to get into all the details of the case. The point is not so relevant. The Ran says you could be medayik from there. That what do you mean it would be mutter on just Shabbat? We're talking about on Shabbat. I can't shecht a chicken on Shabbat. There's an iser shchita. So shouldn't the egg be muktza because I have an iser shchita? How can I get to the egg? On Yom Tov I could shecht the egg, I could shecht the chicken, and I can get to the egg by opening up the chicken. On Shabbat, ma afshar lasot. I can't do shchita. had it not been for the gzera that the Gemara goes on to say, the different gezeras that the Gemara presents of why you can't eat the egg, mashma from the Gemara that it would be permissible to eat the egg. So the Ran's question is, 1 second, why is this egg not muktza if there's an isur shchita? I think this is an exact parallel to our case. Isur shchita, can't get to the egg. Isur stira, I can't get to the fruit. Are we all good with the comparison? Okay. I think it's a great comparison. I didn't see anybody bring this comparison. Yesh lomar, hacha nolad gamar chashvinan le, the came into negol omed legdal beitzim, yatzta mitor an ochel legamre. Ubeitza shala apa pishu ochel gamar apil chashav lachila me'erev Shabbat al korach nolad hu mitaser. If it's a tarnagolet, if it's a chicken, that's to go ahead and raise eggs. So this chicken is not food. It's not fried chicken. It's not chicken marinade. It's a egg machine. Egg machines are not food. They produce eggs. So if the egg machine isn't food, then what's in it is not food either. And then when the beitza, when the egg comes out on Shabbat, now I have food. Where did this food come from? Food came from a non-food item. That's nolad gamar. Food coming from a non-food item is nolad, because there was no food here before, and now I have food. And here's the kicker: aval tarnagolet haomedet la'achila. Again, we're talking about Shabbat. If we have a chicken who's now, this was for eating, mishum isser Shabbat lo yatzta mitor ochel. Just because I can't shech this chicken on Shabbat doesn't mean it's not a chicken for eating. Doesn't mean it's not food. There's just an isser which is preventing me from getting to it. And the analogy he gives, I saw this analogy, I think it's originally from the Ramban elsewhere. I couldn't find it, but the Ran says it here. It's like you want to get something and there's just a lion in your way. It's just a huge lion going rawr. You can't get to it. The isser Shabbat is like a lion saying, can't touch this. This egg isn't for you. Hilchach lo mit'asa misham muktza, elahidi isura aval beitzata delo ne'asra me'olam sharia. Is a lion? The fact that the lion is blocking you, that doesn't create muktza. That's not what's called a siach. That's not what's called a muktza machmad date. He didn't remove his mind from the egg, from the food, from whatever it is. He would love to have it. The egg is totally usable had I been able to get to it. Right? The fruit is raw. It's ready to be eaten. I just can't get to it. So that's not called removing my mind from it. It's just called I have a challenge. I don't know how to get to the egg. I think it's a beautiful answer of the Ran.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just remembered where the Ramban is. Awesome. You know where the Ramban is? Where he says, it's like, was that it? Maybe. The Ramban talks about, there's a Gemara in Eruchin. The Gemara says you're allowed to, we have doctors in the room, right? Who's a doctor? Doctors? The Gemara, again, excellent. The Gemara says that if a woman is in the middle of childbirth, Gemara Eruchin Daf Zayin, if a woman's in the middle of childbirth and she dies, lo alena, on the birthing stool, so you're allowed to go ahead and take a knife and do a cesarean on Shabbat. And Gemara says, Pshita, what's the big deal? Like, why? Of course I can. And Gemara says, no, because there was just a rat. Of course I can. I'm just cutting a piece of meat. The woman's dead. There's no chovel. There's no shchita. There's no malacha. Gemara basically says, no, you have to go to Rosh Hashanah. The chiddush of the Gemara is I can go ahead and I can do an Isser D'Oraita in order to save the baby. One second. Yeah. Do an Isser D'Oraita to save the baby. And the Ramban explains that the baby, usually we don't consider a baby of full life until it has crowned, until its head has come out, or Rosho or Rubo. At that point, we would consider the baby of full life. It has a chazaka of being alive. Anytime while it's still in utero, so it's like a half-life. It doesn't have all rights yet. But the Ramban says once the woman has died, so the baby is considered like it's born. It's just trapped in a box. It's just trapped in a box, and therefore you have to, like, just like if a baby was lo aleinu trapped in a box on Shabbat, you'd be able to do malacha to break open the box. So too, if a woman died on Shabbat during childbirth, you'd be able to break open the box to get out the baby. I think he uses the same language here. Okay, let's leave that. Last answer of the Rashba. Rashba says, "Vem tomar l'Rabbanan kishenivchat miyom tov lama mutar had itkatze ben hashmashosh mishum dekasatar Allah." Isn't it muktza because there's an iser stira? So the Rashba says, "Be'efshar li lomar the masnitin bekotel ru'ua the asuri lifachet biyoma v'da'ate alai." What we're dealing with is not just a wall that doesn't have a plaster. This wall is going to fall. It is poorly constructed. It's windy. It's going to crumble. And you're just sitting there waiting for the wall to fall. And if the wall is going to fall and you have anticipation for it, then you can't say you didn't have your mind on the fruit. You knew it was going to happen.
So how's that any different than the answer in the Gemara that the bricks were stacked without cement? Wouldn't that be part of the definition of kotel ra'ua?
No, not necessarily, because the answer there in the Gemara was just to us to get around the Isser of Stira, to get around the Isser of that. But it didn't deal with muktza. The Gemara goes on and says, 1 second, it's still muktza. Oh, so the bricks are still muktza. You're saying, I hear what you're saying now. You're saying, isn't that answer already answering up? Yeah, no, I agree. You can read this, you can read what the Rashba is saying in the Gemara, meaning when the Gemara says, Avir de Livni, that this is a structure, the wall was not with cement, it's not only getting around the issue of stira, it's also getting around the issue of muktza on the fruit, because I was yoshev u'mitzapeh. Excellent. I like that a lot. Excellent. I give it a like on Facebook. That was excellent. And click like on that one. I like that. You can read that in. So this idea of Adam Yoshev Mitzapeh, we see in the Gemara. We won't read it inside a short time, but the Gemara talks about Rabbi Shimon. If you have shemen shebener, you have a candle that's burning, so can you use the light? Rabbi Shimon, even though the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon lo svir le muktza, he doesn't hold the muktza, it's not true. He does hold the muktza. He just has a higher threshold of what is called muktza. Rabbi Shimon holds that you have to go ahead and you have to mikatze biyadayim. You have to physically do something to show that I wasn't planning on using this on Shabbat. Right? So one of the examples, like grogos utznukim, that the Gemara says at the very end. If I go ahead and I take these dates and whatever they are, figs, and I want to dry them out of my roof. So if I go ahead and I take them and I put them on my roof to dry out, I've done an action which shows that I'm not interested in it. That's going to go ahead and make muktza. Same thing with shemen shebener. If I go ahead and light a candle, so that shows that the oil that was there, I wasn't planning on using that for salad dressing. Right? So the Gemara says, no, if you're yoshev u'mitzapeh, you're waiting for it. It's a bad flame. You're waiting for it to go out. You use the poor wick, so then you were planning on using it. Once I did Adam yoshev u'mitzapeh. The same idea, I couldn't find where this was in the Gemara, the discussion, but we have this problem every Friday night and every night of Yom Tov. Why? Sometimes you can have food, chicken soup is just boiling hot. You can't eat it, right? You'll burn your mouth. So why isn't it muktza? It's not edible. Answer the Rishonim, some of the poskim give is that no, you're yoshev u'mitzapeh. It's within your control. You know that even though it's not edible right now because it's super hot, it will be in 20 minutes when it cools down. And therefore, even though it's something, and that's the point here, even though there's something at bein hashmashos which perhaps I can't get to, perhaps it's not accessible to me right now. Maybe it's behind a wall. Maybe it's an egg inside of a chicken, or maybe it's chicken soup. But the fact that I might be able to get to it, or I'm yoshev u'mitzapeh, that doesn't make it muktza. That makes it something which is in my mind to use. Okay, that is the beginning of our sugya. B'ezrat Hashem will continue next week, hopefully at our regular time, with more aspects. It's other exciting aspects within this Gemara. Again, thank you all for for being a little gamish, a little flexible with your time tonight and accommodating my schedule. Everybody,
Thank you for the wonderful share.
Have a Shabbat Shalom.
Much
Right.